I watched my badge light go from green to black, killing 17 years of my life in one heartbeat. Harvey Sterling, the CEO's 29-year-old son, smiled and told me my intellectual property worth $1.2 billion now belonged to the company. I just asked him, "Did you read Clause 189? The room went dead silent. They had no idea they weren't firing me. They'd just started the countdown. By morning, his assets would be frozen solid. My name is Russell Price. I'm 47 years old, and until yesterday morning, I was the senior systems architect at Titan Defense Systems. More importantly, I'm the father of Perry Jr., who just got accepted to MIT with a $240,000 price tag hanging over our heads. That acceptance letter came 3 weeks ago. Same day Harvey started making noise about restructuring legacy personnel. I stood at that mahogany conference table watching the LED on my security badge die. For 17 years, that little green light had been my key to everything. The server rooms, the classified labs, the executive floors where I'd earned my reputation as the guy who actually built what the suit sold. Now it was just dead plastic. Harvey sat at the far end like he was playing dress-up in Daddy's expensive suit. This kid had never written a line of code in his life, but he was about to steal the Phoenix security architecture, the biometric defense system I'd built from scratch since 2007. The system protecting military bases, federal buildings, and Fortune 500 companies across the country. My life's work, and more importantly, Perry's college fund. 3 weeks ago, Harvey had walked through our engineering floor making comments about old-school approaches and aging-out legacy thinking. Told Rebecca, one of the junior engineers I'd been mentoring, that she needed to think beyond the limitations of previous generation developers. The kid was 22, fresh out of college, and Harvey was positioning himself as her advocate against the outdated guy who'd actually taught her everything she knew. Rebecca had come to my office afterward, embarrassed. "Mr. Price, I didn't ask him to say that. You know I respect what you've built here." I told her not to worry about it. Harvey was just establishing dominance, marking territory like a dog. But sitting in that conference room now, watching him slide papers across the table with that smug grin, I realized it had been more than posturing. It had been reconnaissance. He used words like consolidating intellectual property assets and streamlining for optimal investor appeal, corporate speak for theft. The document showed the patent valuation, $1.2 billion in bold letters. He was taking Phoenix and firing me for cause, fabricated conflict of interest, to ensure I couldn't claim royalties. The money I'd been counting on to cover Perry's education, to prove to my ex-wife Sarah that the divorce hadn't destroyed everything, to show my son that his old man hadn't wasted his life in a corporate tower. I looked around that freezing conference room. Stanley from operations, we'd shared lunch every Tuesday for 5 years, talked about our kids' baseball games, suddenly found the table grain fascinating. The legal team typed furiously, avoiding eye contact like I'd developed a contagious disease. Even the young engineers I'd mentored were studying carpet patterns with intense concentration. This hurt more than the money. These people had been my work family. I'd stayed late helping Rebecca debug her first major project. I'd covered for Stanley when his wife had cancer surgery. I'd written recommendation letters, approved bonuses, attended weddings. Now they were throwing me under the bus to save themselves from Harvey's modernization campaign. But the worst part was thinking about the call I'd have to make to Perry. 3 weeks ago, when that MIT acceptance came, he'd called me crying with happiness. "Dad, I got in. I actually got in." First person in our family to get accepted to a school like that. His mother had already started bragging to her book club friends, posting on Facebook about her brilliant son. Now I'd have to tell him his old man had screwed up, lost the job that was supposed to pay for his dreams. That Harvey Sterling, some entitled rich kid who'd never earned anything in his life, had taken the work I'd traded my marriage for, my 40s for, my relationship with my son for, during those years when I chose code over Little League games. I didn't beg. I didn't argue about tenure or severance packages. Instead, I felt this ice-cold calm settle over me, the same feeling I got when debugging critical system failures under pressure. I looked Harvey dead in the eye and asked if he was sure he'd read Clause 189. The typing stopped. Harvey blinked, and for just a second that confident mask slipped. A microscopic twitch in his left eye told me everything. He hadn't read it. Of course not. Harvey never read anything longer than a tweet. He relied on his army of new lawyers to handle details. But these sharks didn't know our history. They didn't know about the fail-safe Albert Hansen and I had buried in the original employment contract back in 2007. Harvey recovered quickly, waved his hand dismissively. Legal reviewed everything thoroughly, signed the papers, Russell. Security's waiting to escort you out. I picked up his expensive fountain pen. Heavy, probably cost more than most people's car payments. Everyone watched my hand, thinking I was surrendering, thinking I was broken. I signed my name at the bottom. Russell Price. The ink looked permanent, but I knew better. Standing up, the chair scraped against the floor, harsh sound that made the junior counsel flinch. I didn't say goodbye to my former team. They'd made their choice when they stayed silent. At the door, I turned back one last time. Harvey was already reaching for champagne, looking victorious. "Enjoy your morning, Harvey," I told him. "Dawn comes fast." He laughed, thought I was just a bitter old engineer muttering on my way out. He had no idea I was being literal. Security walked me down in silence. Davis, the guard, knew Perry played varsity baseball, knew I'd been here since before his first day on the job. He looked apologetic, but kept walking. We rode the elevator down, and I watched those numbers count like a timer. 40, 30, 20, 10. Each floor taking me further from 17 years of building something that mattered. Outside on the sidewalk, morning sun hit my face. People rushed past, no clue that a corporate execution had just happened 40 floors up. I pulled out my phone with hands that weren't shaking from fear but from pure adrenaline. Opened the Titan administrative app on my phone. Should have been locked out. Should have shown a bright red error screen denying access. Instead, the dashboard loaded perfectly. Green status bars pulsing, real-time system logs scrolling, full root directory access to Phoenix. Harvey had been so eager to humiliate me in front of his audience, so desperate for that theatrical moment of cutting off my badge, that he'd made a critical mistake. He'd prioritized the show over procedure, kicked the architect out of the house but left all the keys in the lock. I stood there on that busy corner, looking at my phone screen, thinking about Perry's voice 3 weeks ago. "Dad, MIT, can you believe it?" The kid had worked his ass off. 4.3 GPA, captain of the debate team, volunteer work at the homeless shelter every weekend. Everything I should have been doing as a father instead of debugging code at midnight. Sarah, my ex-wife, had been surprisingly supportive when the acceptance letter came. First time we'd talked without lawyers in 2 years. "Russell, I know we have our issues, but you should be proud. Perry's going to do amazing things." For a moment, it felt like maybe the divorce hadn't poisoned everything. Maybe I could still be the dad Perry deserved. Now Harvey Sterling was about to take that away. Not just the job, but the proof that all those missed baseball games and forgotten school plays had been worth something. That working 80-hour weeks while my marriage fell apart had been building towards something meaningful. 17 years ago, Titan wasn't the glass tower it is today. We worked out of a converted warehouse in the sketchy part of town, 5 engineers and a dream of building something that mattered. Air conditioning never worked, place smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. George Sterling was just a silent investor then, writing checks and staying out of our way. The man running things was Albert Hansen. Al was a real engineer who'd been forced to wear a tie, and he hated every minute of it. Had grease under his fingernails and coffee stains on everything he owned. Al cared about 2 things: writing clean code and taking care of the people who wrote it. I was 30 when I walked into that warehouse, fresh out of my divorce, looking for something to rebuild my life around. Sarah had just served me papers, said I cared more about computers than my family. Maybe she was right, but I needed to prove that obsession could create something worthwhile. Al hired me because during the interview, I spotted a buffer overflow vulnerability in their demo system that could have been exploited to access classified military networks. "Most people see the pretty interface," he said. "You see the dangerous cracks underneath. That's what we need here." Phoenix was born in that warehouse. I built the core architecture working 16-hour days, surviving on vending machine coffee and determination. The system was designed to be unhackable. Biometric authentication so sophisticated it could identify users by heartbeat patterns, retinal micromovements, even stress hormones and fingerprint residue. But Al had a story that shaped everything we built. In the 90s, he'd been lead engineer at a massive defense contractor, invented a guidance system that revolutionized military drone technology. One morning, he showed up to work and found his access badge deactivated. Company had patented his work, fired him, and literally erased his name from all documentation. He walked away with nothing but a cardboard box and a burning lesson about corporate betrayal. The sharks always come eventually, Al told me one night in 2010, both of us drinking cheap whiskey from paper cups after successfully testing Phoenix against a simulated cyber attack. Once the system proves itself, the money guys swoop in. They don't care about elegant code or the engineer's sacrifice. They just see dollar signs. That's when we wrote Clause 189. Not just a legal provision, but a technical masterpiece. We called it the Dual Verification Transfer Protocol. But it was really a digital dead man's switch designed to protect the creator's rights. The concept was brilliant in its simplicity. Phoenix's intellectual property wasn't just a static patent. It was a living system genetically linked to its creator. Any ownership transfer required 2 cryptographic keys turned simultaneously. The first key was administrative, standard legal paperwork, contracts, corporate signatures. That was the visible layer, the show for lawyers and executives. The second key was personal. My biometric signature verified through the Federal Patent Registry. Not just a digital signature, but a living confirmation from the creator's DNA, retinal scan, and voice pattern analysis. Without both keys, the transfer was legally and technically void. But the genius was in the consequences. We programmed Phoenix with protective instincts. If the system detected an ownership transfer attempt without proper dual verification, it would interpret this as a hostile takeover, a security breach at the highest level. The response was automatic and devastating. Every active Phoenix license, every bank, government agency, military installation, corporate vault would immediately revert to pending authorization status. The system wouldn't shut down completely, which could endanger lives, but it would lock out administrators, freeze billing systems, and broadcast to the world that the software was under ownership dispute. We buried Clause 189 in Technical Addendum D, subsection 7, sandwiched between dry paragraphs about server heat dissipation and floating point calculation protocols. To overworked corporate lawyers billing by the hour, it looked like boring engineering specifications. They saw verification protocols and assumed it was just technical documentation about how the software operated, not a legal nuclear bomb waiting for the right trigger. Al retired 4 years ago when George Sterling bought controlling interest, moved to his cabin in Montana satisfied that he'd protected our legacy. Left me alone in the corporate tower Titan had become, guardian of a system that was about to prove its creator's worth. I drove straight home, mind racing through the implications, not just for me, but for Perry. The kid had been texting me updates about MIT orientation materials, dorm assignments, course catalogs. Dad, they want me to declare a preliminary major, thinking computer science like you. First time he'd ever said he wanted to follow in my footsteps. My home office was my sanctuary, 3 dedicated servers humming in the corner, temperature controlled, all status LEDs glowing steady green. I moved with surgical precision, no wasted motion. Panic was for amateurs who didn't have a plan. Opened the biometric safe under my desk. Inside, resting on velvet, was the hard copy of my patent certification, heavy paper with the gold seal of the U.S. Patent Office, patent number US 847392B. To Harvey, just a number on a balance sheet. To me, the physical proof that 17 years of sacrifice hadn't been meaningless. I connected my air-gapped terminal to the encrypted line, bypassed standard protocols, typed commands to query the local seed repository. Lines of hexadecimal code cascaded down the screen, the cryptographic seeds linking my biological identity to Phoenix. Cross-referenced with the public key infrastructure on the National Registry. Terminal blinked once. Green text appeared. Preliminary verification pending. The trap had engaged. Phoenix had detected Harvey's ownership transfer and was reaching into the void, looking for my biometric confirmation, looking for permission that would never come. My burner phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. Only 3 people in Titan's compliance department had my emergency contact, and 2 were too scared to make calls after midnight. Answered without speaking. Nervous whisper on the other end. They don't know. Executive team has no idea Clause 189 is active. Asked what the rush was. Voice hesitated, then rushed out. Press conference at 8 a.m. Major announcement. Made perfect sense. Harvey wasn't just stealing Phoenix. He was performing a coronation, going to stand in front of cameras declaring victory before the battle was even fought, creating narrative momentum so powerful that legal technicalities wouldn't matter later. But there was something else. Press conferences at dawn screamed desperation. You don't announce restructuring at 8 a.m. unless you need market reaction by 10 a.m. I pulled up public UCC filings, wrote a script to search for anything linked to Titan's tax ID or Phoenix's patent numbers. Results came back immediately. Harvey had filed paperwork at 11:47 p.m., 45 minutes after my badge went black, used my forced signature as collateral for an $800 million bridge loan from a Singapore private equity firm, high interest, 30-day term. He was betting the house on cards he didn't actually hold. This explained everything. Harvey wasn't just arrogant, he was desperate. Titan was leveraged to the breaking point, and he'd promised the board a miracle. The Phoenix theft wasn't about proving himself anymore. It was about survival. My phone rang. Different tone, personal line. Caller ID showed Perry Jr. My stomach dropped. Kid should be asleep, not calling at midnight. Dad? Sorry to call so late. Just got off work at the restaurant. Perry had been bussing tables 3 nights a week to help with college expenses, even though I'd told him not to worry about money. Wanted to tell you about something cool. My manager went to MIT in the 80s, and he was telling me about this professor who teaches advanced cryptography. Says the guy worked on some classified government project. I closed my eyes, listening to my son's excitement. Here he was, working his ass off to pay for school, talking about cryptography professors, while Harvey Sterling was trying to steal the very work that could secure his future. That's great, son. You should definitely look into that class. Dad, are you okay? You sound tired. Just working late. You know how it is. I know, but don't forget to take care of yourself. Mom always said you work too hard. Pause. I'm proud of you, you know. What you built at Titan, it's going to help protect people. That matters. After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a full minute. Perry was proud of me. Proud of Phoenix, proud of the work I'd traded his childhood for. Now Harvey was going to steal that, claim credit for protecting people, while my son bussed tables to afford the education I should have been able to pay for easily. I opened a new file and began typing. Not just legal documentation, I was crafting Harvey's destruction. Started with the server logs from his country club signing, cross-referenced with his public schedule claiming legal review with external counsel. The timestamps painted a clear picture of fraud. At 7:14 p.m., while Harvey claimed to be in comprehensive legal meetings, his tablet had connected to Phoenix's transfer system from Rolling Hills Country Club, 10 miles from any law office. He'd signed a $1.2 billion IP transfer while waiting for appetizers, using an unsecured cellular connection instead of hardwired legal workstations. This wasn't just negligence, it was material misrepresentation to the board. He'd lied about the legal process to rush the asset into the system so he could secure bridge financing. Perfect ammunition for what came next. I called Brenda Palmer. She was a retired corporate attorney who drafted Titan's original employment agreements, the legal fortress Al and I had built our protection inside. She answered on the second ring despite the hour. Russell, I was wondering when you'd call. Saw the news about the restructuring. Her voice was sharp, alert. Let me guess, they missed Clause 189. Every word of it. Harvey signed from a golf club while lying to the board about legal review. Idiots. Give me an hour to pull the archives. We're filing for emergency injunction first thing in the morning. Brenda, there's more. He's already leveraged the IP for bridge financing. If this goes public with Phoenix locked down, he's not just fired, he's facing federal fraud charges. Long pause. Russell, are you sure you want to burn it all down? Once we light this fuse, there's no putting it back. I thought about Perry working late at the restaurant, saving every dollar for school. Thought about Harvey's smug smile claiming credit for my life's work. Light the fuse. At 4 a.m., I initiated the Ghost Protocol, not a shutdown, surgical precision. Core Phoenix functions stayed active, protecting hospitals and banks that depended on the system. But I severed every commercial connection to Titan. Billing systems locked, administrative dashboards frozen, update capabilities revoked. Phoenix was now running free, alive enough to work but dead to Titan's revenue stream. And in 32 hours, when the verification deadline hit, every client would know exactly who really owned the system they'd been paying for. Dawn came at 6:23 a.m., painted the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. I sat in my car 2 blocks from Titan Tower, laptop connected to secure network, watching the final countdown. Single timer synchronized with the Federal Patent Registry, 0 hours, 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining. Status bar pulsed steadily. Verification pending. Waiting for my biometric signature that would never come. Harvey was probably waking up in his penthouse, thinking about his 8 a.m. press conference, having no clue the ground had turned to quicksand under his feet. Timer hit 0. Screen refreshed quietly. Text changed. Verification failed. Transfer void. Reverting to original owner. The cascade began. Central Registry updated the master ownership file for patent 847392B. No longer Titan Defense Systems. Now listed Russell Price. Then Phoenix's logic lock activated, sending automatic notifications to every active node running the system. I looked up at Titan Tower. Through the glass lobby walls, I could see the massive 60-foot digital dashboard that usually displayed stock prices and corporate announcements. Suddenly, it flickered. Harvey's smiling face vanished. Screen went black for a heartbeat, then blazing white letters on crimson background. License revoked. Unauthorized commercial use detected. Copyright owner R. Price. Security guard in the lobby dropped his coffee cup, backed away from reception as every monitor displayed the same message. Building lighting switched to warning amber, but the real devastation was happening in client data centers. At 6:01 a.m., automated billing systems tried to verify vendor status. Registry check showed Titan no longer authorized. Contracts switched to pending dispute, triggering financial safeguards. Titan's revenue stream flatlined, hit 0. Pre-market algorithms picked up the story immediately. Titan Defense loses key IP rights. Phoenix patent reverts to creator. Defense deal in jeopardy. Stock didn't slide. It fell off a cliff. Dropped 15% in 30 seconds, then 25%. That's when Harvey's personal trap snapped shut. His margin loan required 40% maintenance. Bank's risk management algorithm saw the crash, calculated his collateral value, issued immediate demand for $40 million cash within the hour or automatic liquidation. Black sedan screeched up to Titan building. Harvey jumped out wearing sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, nothing like yesterday's master of the universe. Ran toward the doors, shouting at security, waving his phone, stopped dead when he saw the giant lobby screen. License revoked. Small, frantic figure dwarfed by his 60-foot declaration of failure. My phone rang. George Sterling, Harvey's father. Voice sounded like it had been run through a shredder. Started with threats about the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, prosecutors on speed dial, making sure I never touched a computer again. I waited for him to finish, then asked if he'd checked the stock price lately. The bluster evaporated instantly. Switched to pleading. Double my severance, consultant position, higher hourly rate. When that failed, he played the guilt card, asked about the 5,000 Titan employees, the families who'd suffer if the company collapsed. George, I remember those employee faces yesterday. Your son called me outdated and they stayed silent. They chose their safety over my sacrifice. I won't actively harm them. Phoenix is running in safe mode, but I won't save a fraud either. Hung up and drove to the federal courthouse. Brenda was already there, calm as a surgeon. Harvey arrived with a criminal defense attorney, not corporate counsel. Looked small, arrogance replaced by jittery terror. Courtroom was packed with journalists. Judge Patricia Holloway had a reputation for destroying corporate fraudsters. Harvey's lawyer argued the software lock was illegal hacking. Clause 189 was unenforceable poison pill. Painted me as disgruntled employee holding company hostage. Then the doors opened. Room went silent. Man walked in wearing a 20-year-old suit, gray beard, slight limp, but presence that filled the space. Albert Hansen. Hadn't been seen publicly since selling his shares 4 years ago. Al walked past journalists, past Harvey staring like he'd seen a ghost, nodded to me and Brenda, asked the judge for permission to approach as original author of the employment agreement in question. He pulled out his small leather notebook, coffee-stained and oil-marked, the one from our warehouse days. Opened to a page dated 17 years ago. Placed it on the projector. Screen showed his handwritten diagram of Phoenix's logic flow. Right in the center, box labeled, Clause 189 Protection Logic. Next to the diagram in Al's jagged writing, build it right, protect it right, let the system remember who made it. If they steal the house, the keys must melt. Al turned to the microphone. His voice was gravel but clear. Your Honor, this wasn't a hack. This was fundamental architecture. We designed Phoenix to recognize its creator. That young man tried to trick the child into abandoning its mother. The child screamed. He pointed at Harvey. What Russell Price did wasn't sabotage. It was the system functioning exactly as specified in documentation George Sterling signed 17 years ago. The software protected itself because that's what we built it to do. Harvey slumped in his chair. His lawyer stopped shuffling papers. The evidence was physical, historical, undeniable. This wasn't just a legal clause, it was the philosophy of the code itself. Judge Holloway looked at the notebook, at the server logs, at Harvey's empty face, brought her gavel down with sharp finality, granted permanent injunction, upheld asset freeze, declared the transfer fraudulent and void. Court recognized Phoenix's intellectual property as belonging solely to Russell Price. Al winked at me, small gesture hidden in his beard. We'd rewritten the rules of corporate warfare. 2 days later, I incorporated Price Phoenix Labs, rented workspace in a converted warehouse, exposed brick and terrible lighting, but it was ours. Sent contracts to clients from the crisis. They all signed immediately. Tired of corporate games, they wanted the engineer, not the salesman. Hired back my core team, offered equity, not just bonuses. Built a company where the creator mattered more than the name on the door. Month later, leaving the new office, my phone buzzed. Email from the Department of Defense. Formal recognition of Price Phoenix Labs as sole provider of next-generation biometric security. Invitation to bid on a contract twice the size of Harvey's stolen deal. Perry called as I walked to my car. Dad, saw the news about your defense contract. Mom says she's proud of you. Says I should be too. First time he'd said that since the divorce. Your MIT tuition's covered, son. Full ride, no student loans. Dad? That's amazing. But you know what? I'm proud of you for more than the money. You proved something important, that the person who builds something should get credit for it. That experience and integrity matter more than politics and privilege. I looked up at the night sky. Somewhere Al was probably fishing, knowing his legacy was safe. I hadn't just taken revenge, I'd restored order, proved that in a world worshipping CEOs, the only name that matters is the one in the code. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting methodical.